We're in the river and there's dying fish everywhere. People are very alarmed, particularly this year. Fish are vanishing, horsefly, lower Shuswap, rivers of the Central Coast. We go into places and we see more dead fish than alive. Sometimes we can't even see an alive fish. All pre-spawn mortality. There's a lot of fish dying on this coast, in the farms and in the rivers.
We've seen fish with all sorts of things going wrong with them, like big blisters on their side, and you cut them open and their whole stomach cavity is full of water and blood and yellowing, pale gills, pale heart, lesions in the stomach wall, like red blisters all on the inside of their stomach. Some of them, the flesh just got blisters throughout the whole fish. And all these fish appear to be dead pre-spawn. The legs.
So look at all the fish that are here.
Look at them all dead, all pre-spawn. It's pretty obvious that there's something going on. If you've actually walked any of these rivers or gone fishing.
Full of eggs, eh? This is strange. You know, we're right on the spawning grounds. This fish has made the whole trip, but she never spawned. She never released those precious eggs. And we're seeing a lot of this. Most of these fish look like they haven't spawned. I'm tracking these viruses. I know I'm running up against trade laws, and I keep thinking in the back of my mind, how are they going to stop me? And I get an email from a lawyer. It says, Alex, have you noticed Bill 37? It's coming right at you. And I look up, and I was really appalled. What Bill 37 would have done is prevent me from reporting that a salmon picked up in the TNT supermarket or superstore had a particular virus. No one would be able to report if a farm animal from a specific location had a virus. If you find a dangerous disease on these farms, you're not allowed to talk about it.
This act brings in some quite repressive measures for people who release information. If somebody working in the system is disturbed by what they see and want to go public, they have to get past the idea that they could be put in jail for doing that. Well, they don't want this information coming out. For whatever reason, I'm not going to speculate about why they don't want it coming out, but industry didn't want it coming out, and the government sure didn't either. The position of the government and the position of the corporations was almost identical. The position of the government and the position of the corporations was almost identical.
Look at that tissue. Piscine reovirus, one of the symptoms is a soft heart. This one is very firm, and this heart is extremely soft. This is a classic symptom of Piscine reovirus, the mushy hearts. A fish with a heart like this, I doubt this fish should go up a big waterfall. And this is what they say in Norway. They say fish with a Piscine reovirus may not be able to ascend a river. We're seeing these mushy hearts before the rapids, out in the ocean, but not after Hell's Gate. I don't think these fish can make it through Hell's Gate. The Pacific Salmon Commission says up to 90% of some runs of salmon in some years vanish after Hell's Gate. I wonder if it's something like this. I wonder if it's Piscine reovirus that's killing a lot of our salmon. It's going to fine me $75,000 and 2 years in prison, for naming the location where I found a disease in an animal.
Oh yeah, this is their stated intention. We are going to do this. So this is their vision of how they want this to operate. You have to have complete and absolute faith in the people that are guarding this.
This was a little bit terrifying because it looked like it was going to pass. You know, everybody's analysis of it was going to pass. It felt like Canada was changing. It felt like democracy was, receding. And I was trying to get legal advice very, very quickly. Like, what do I need to take off my website? Is this going to be law like tomorrow? And it was a very disorienting time. But meanwhile, other lawyers, Andrew Gage with West Coast Environmental Law, the head of the Freedom of Information Act, they were writing letters saying, you know what, this is really actually not constitutionally, this government should just really check the legality out of this. And Minister McRae basically admitted to that. He said, yeah, it may not be so constitutional, but we can always iron that out later, and then quietly, for some reason, they just dropped it. It remains on the order paper, so the next time they sit, which is very infrequent, they could pass it. I mean, I think one of the big issues that people need to realize is democracy is slipping away from us. Our ability to protect ourselves, our children, and our homes are being taken away from us. There's this incredibly careless attitude towards the wild fish. It's a huge threat. I mean, these fish are a supreme athlete. Anything that turns their heart to mush, they're not going to be able to dash away from a whale. They're not going to be able to swim through rapids. They're not going to be able to chase down a herring to catch it and eat it. They cannot survive unless they are extremely fit. They're dying, and you got the farms just brewing these things and pouring it out and pouring it out. It just doesn't seem to end, and the wild fish will never be able to deal with it, until the last one's gone. And I have got to wonder if that is, at some level, the intent, because the level of carelessness is unforgivable. We know a lot about salmon, we know a lot about disease, and we know this is wrong. So it's a difficult battle. Let's look at the timing of the situation. The Fraser sockeye began to decline in the early 1990s, at exactly the time that the salmon feedlots were put onto their migration route. Dr. Miller, when she began to see a strong correlation between these dying sockeye and the salmon leukemia virus, and she read that the salmon leukemia virus was in the salmon farms, she naturally wanted to go test those fish. So in April of 2010, she made a request to DFO to test farm salmon for this virus, but access was denied.
Justice Cohen called on DFO's Dr. Christy Miller to testify about her findings. For the first time, the public would have a chance to hear Miller speak about her discovery, since her gag order.
Virus. Your leading suspect was salmon leukemia virus.
Yes, it was.
And if in fact that's the case, this in fact may be the smoking gun for the 2009 declines.
It could be the smoking gun.
She's doing some fantastic work under very difficult conditions, and in conditions where she says she was for reporting on health issues around wild salmon. She felt intimidated about the potential loss of her data if she went public. She felt intimidated in terms of her budget, and so that was extremely revealing.
She was not allowed to test these fish that are in public waters, releasing their pathogens into the most valuable salmon stocks in this country. And she was not allowed to follow the trail into the pens.
Dr. Christy Miller, her work, genomic profiling, she makes the fish talk. It's like sitting a fish down in the office and saying, how are you feeling? So in all our bodies, we've got these switches that ones that are dying seem to be dying of the same thing. Well, that was huge because all the other scientists that tried to figure this out were like, they couldn't figure it out. Leukemia, retrovirus, brain tumor, immune system decay. And she looked at that and went, salmon leukemia. Salmon leukemia is this virus that raged through the salmon farming industry right at the beginning when it went into the Campbell River area in the early 90s. The salmon leukemia virus attacks their immune system, so they die of something else. It's a retrovirus like AIDS. And DFO wrote about 6 papers on it, and they found that virtually all of the Chinook farms were infected, and that this virus killed 100% of the sockeye salmon that were exposed to it, and they never did anything about it. And as soon as Dr. Miller's work, as soon as her compass pointed at salmon farms, she wasn't allowed to go to meetings. She wasn't allowed to talk to the media, even when she published in the Journal of Science.
So they hold 600,000 to over 1 million fish stationary in one place. This amplifies the waste, but also, most seriously, the pathogens. Because it's so easy for viruses and bacteria to jump fish, to mutate, and then explode out of the farm in a billowing cloud. This is the major wild salmon migration route in British Columbia. That's where they put the salmon farms. They're clustered in these little narrow channels. Now, when one of these farms has a disease outbreak, so many viruses come out of the farm that they actually fill the entire channel. And then here come the Fraser sockeye, and they go through this channel and they come out the other end. And when the fish go on, they're contaminated, without a doubt, with whatever is coming out of those farms. I know, I've seen with my own eyes what happens to them when they go by. Lice on them from the farms, that they're also being exposed to whatever bacteria and viruses are on these farms at the same time. My first response was get out in the rivers. Let's have a look around, let's see where this is. Made a net and just went around and started looking at all the fish. Because if you just sit there with that bad news, it destroys you. But if you can get out and do something, it's a lot healthier. It was late in the season, most of the salmon were already in the river, but we dashed down to the lower Fraser River because we had been getting reports from people down there that there was a massive number of salmon dying in the river without spawning.
Wow, you guys found a lot already. Really yellow. Okay,
a lot of work. All right. And within, what, 15 minutes, we've found 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just in a tiny section of river, pre-spawn mortality. I haven't seen one that spawned. Have you seen one?
Zero. Not one.
Viruses are delicate. You got to get them in cool right away and keep them fresh, and that's why we work so fast. Oh, he's got that calamaris. Yes. It is a huge challenge to get these samples to the labs in time, and we need a lab in British Columbia. It's ridiculous. I'm not allowed to use the labs at DFO. I'm not even allowed to talk to them. I mean, I'd like to drive to Nanaimo with these samples right now and put them in a -80 freezer in Dr. Miller's lab and have her look at them. She can do 200 fish a day for 40 pathogens. We're going to spend $200 on just this fish for 3 viruses. I mean, these fish are dying. They have a problem. We're willing to do the lead work and drive the samples right to the door. We're not even allowed to talk to them. We pay their salaries. These fish are dying out. So we ship them to Norway, which is expensive and time-consuming, and the quality of samples is damaged, but we're not going to be stopped by closed doors. DFO does not want to know what this fish died of. Big yellow Chinook salmon, a white Harrison Spring, that had ISA virus. This sockeye had ISA virus. This coho had ISA virus. We tested 11 fish in the Fraser River, and we got it 3 times. It was European strain ISA virus. So while all this was happening, Dr. Rick Rutledge was very worried about the river's inlet sockeye.
So I eventually sent some samples in for testing.
I remember when he called me, it was a dark October night, and he said to me, you know, Alex, are you sitting down? It was like he was going to tell me that someone we knew had died. And he said the tests came back positive for ISA virus in Rivers Inlet smolts. I was devastated. You know, I thought, okay, 20 years of trying to prevent this industry from destroying the wild salmon of Canada, and I have failed. We gave a press conference. We thought the scientific community should be given the opportunity to engage on this, but really all hell broke loose when we did that. The CFIA came and took our samples and said they were going to run tests, and we were supportive of that. Very quickly thereafter, the CFIA gave a press release as well. The Minister of Fisheries came out and said that all of them, that our results were completely wrong. They did a press release to say that there was no problem, there was no ISA. They said everything was negative. We were standing on a riverbank, actually, listening to it on our cell phones, and I kept waiting for them to address the whole issue, what was happening in the Fraser River, what we had found down there. When they kept talking about the ISA findings, they fixated on the river's inlet. They never talked about the ISA findings we had in the Fraser River. And they never mentioned them. The minister never mentioned them. They treated us like we didn't exist, like this work was not going on. These were fresh samples. They were fighting us, not trying to protect us. This is an internal CFIA email from Joseph Bears to a whole list of people. It says, Con, it's clear that we're turning the PR tide to our favor. And this is because of the very successful performance of our spokes at the technical briefing yesterday. You, Stephen, Peter, and Paul were a terrific team, indeed. Congratulations. One battle is won. Now we have to nail the surveillance piece, and we will win the war also. Oh, what war? What, the war against us, the public? Con, who's Cornelius Keeley, comes back, and he says, hey, concentrate on the headlines. That's often all people read or remember. It's just, it really, these are the same guys looking after H1N1 and mad cow disease. It really does concern me. These are the same guys looking after H1N1 and mad cow disease. It really does concern me. These are the same guys looking after H1N1 and mad cow disease. It really does concern me.
I tried to think as the season was winding down what on earth the cause might be. It had to be something new, I thought, because it hadn't happened before, as far as I could tell.
Let's look at the timing of the situation. The Fraser sockeye began to decline in the early 1990s, at exactly the time that the salmon feedlots were put onto their migration route.
It had to be something new, I thought, because it hadn't happened before, as far as I could tell.
Let's look at the timing of the situation. The Fraser sockeye began to decline in the early 1990s, at exactly the time that the salmon feedlots were put onto their migration route.
It had to be something new, I thought.
It was European strain ISA virus.
So I eventually sent some samples in for testing.
Viruses are delicate. You got to get them in cool right away and keep them fresh, and that's why we work so fast. Oh, he's got that.
So I eventually sent some samples in for testing.
Viruses are delicate. You got to get them in cool right away and keep them fresh, and that's why we work so fast. Oh,
So I eventually sent some samples in for testing.
And the problem was the samples were so degraded. Now, a year after tracking viruses, I am amazed that we got an ISA hit at all in those samples. They were in a household freezer for months.
So I eventually sent some samples in for testing.
viruses are delicate. You got to get them in cool right away and keep them fresh, and that's why we work so fast.
Canadian Food Inspection Agency contacted me and asked me to turn over all my samples, which I did. They shipped them to the testing lab in Moncton, and they tested them for the remaining samples for the infectious salmon anemia virus. The remaining samples for the infectious salmon anemia virus.
And the problem was the samples were so degraded. Now, a year after tracking viruses, I am amazed that we got an ISA hit at all in those samples. They were in a household freezer for months.
I eventually sent some samples in for testing.
I remember when he called me, it was a dark October night.
And I'm distressed about it. This is a serious matter, and the government is not taking it sufficiently seriously in my mind. So I eventually sent some samples in for testing.
And the problem was the samples were so degraded. Now, a year after tracking viruses, I am amazed that we got an ISA hit at all in those samples. They were in a household freezer for months.
Want to pay the price for a trip to paradise? Come up and see me. If you want to have some fun and don't know where to run, come up and see me. If you want to be amused, you're gonna have to lose that money, baby. Sound of money ain't somebody, yeah. sweeter than honey. Yeah. Sound of money ain't so funny. Yeah. What you gonna do with it? Hey. What you gonna do with it? What you gonna do with it? Do you want to pay the price for a trip to paradise? Come up and see me sometime. If you want to have some fun and don't know where to run, come up and see me sometime. If you want to be amused, you're gonna have to lose some of that money. Some money, sweeter than honey, yeah. Sound of money, sweeter than honey, yeah. Sound of money, sweeter than honey, yeah. What you gonna do with it? Hey. What you gonna do with it? What you gonna do with it? Tonight. What you gonna do with it? What you gonna do with it? Tonight.
When Nell Gagne, who did the test for them, actually went on the stand, she said she had gotten weak positives, and for her, the results were inconclusive.
Were your RT-PCR results inconclusive?
We reported them as inconclusive, and in this case, all samples submitted showed extensive to total degradation of RNA.
There's only one lab that didn't find it, and that was the reference lab from DFO in Moncton. And it turns out they were sampling a totally different segment from everyone else who actually found the ISA virus. 3 or 4 labs that are finding it, and one that's a government lab that's not. You have to pause and wonder what's going on.
In that testing, we found 2 positive samples out of 48.
We did indeed obtain ISA sequence.
I had 1 positive.
Dr. Miller was prohibited by DFO from testing for ISA virus, but a salmon farm came to her, and their fish were turning yellow and dying, and they couldn't figure out why. And she decided to test them for ISA virus, even though she was instructed not to. She wanted to get to the bottom of it.
And we did identify some positive ISA fish among their fish. It was decided that we should contact Ottawa about this. And so Stephen Stevens in Ottawa was contacted, and we basically told them the results that we had. I don't think that Stephen Stevens in Ottawa was very pleased that we were doing this testing. Basically, there was a general feeling that as a scientist I should not be undertaking research on something if I didn't understand the ramifications of what the results could do.
Let's say we do find ISA in BC and all of a sudden markets are closed, then there will be no trade, basically.
That's when a real aha went off in my mind. I'm like, oh, I totally get this now. You guys are hiding this because it's going to damage the industry. It was so transparent and clear. So, you know, this is where you can see the size of the thing that we're coming up against. This is international trade. Our tests are saying ISA virus is here. The province has told these trade partners that it's not here, and these fish are going over the border. Is this spreading ISA down the coast of California? Is this spreading ISA into Washington State? We don't know.
Results have to be confirmed through our National Reference Laboratory. And my understanding as of this date, none of those tests, and as of this date today, none of those tests have ever been confirmed from our National Reference Laboratory.
So there is no evidence to support that ISA is occurring in either wild or cultured salmon in BC?
Yes, there is no evidence to support that.
These are the same guys looking after H1N1 and mad cow disease. It really does concern me. These are the same guys looking after H1N1 and mad cow disease. It really does concern me. These are the same guys looking after H1N1 and mad cow disease. It really does concern me. Everyone who's reported the virus has suffered a consequence. Kabenga got his lab audited. Dr. Miller gets muzzled as soon as her work takes her towards the fish farm viruses. Everyone who tries to speak up about these viruses gets shut up in some way.
The sequences that we have detected in samples from British Columbia have all been of European genotype.
And so that gives me a pretty high level of confidence, along with all the tests I do every day. We do not have ISA virus in British Columbia.
Dr. Gary Marty is the provincial health veterinarian for British Columbia. He is in charge of monitoring for diseases in both farmed salmon and wild salmon.
Gary Marty is in a very difficult situation right now because if he reports that ISA is here, the industry that he works with is going to crumble. Shareholders probably don't know what's brewing here in British Columbia. So Dr. Marty is under enormous pressure right now because he is the only one that has had access to these fish and looking into them. So much hinges on
These are Gary
what
Marty's records. These are Gary Marty's records.
These records are incidences when the fish farm companies came to Gary Marty and asked him to do specific tests on their fish. So here we have a case where Marine Harvest in 2009 submitted fish tissue, and they want tests for ISA. Mortality has been increasing. And so in this report, Marine Harvest, 2 days later, specific request for a test for ISA. This company is familiar with ISA, is asking for a test. Signed by Gary Marty. Yeah, what do you know, Gary Marty? Here you go. They again sent tissue for ISA test, Marine Harvest. This is another one, I don't know what it means, but sampled 4 fresh morts with hot guts. Mortality increased over the last 2 days. You know, in the reports, Gary Marty does say he sees sign of ISA. There you go, that's an ISA lesion, that's an ISA lesion. There's a fish that died of ISA lesions. ISA lesions, according to Gary Marty.
There were 55 instances where I put in a diagnosis that was described as a classic lesion of the ISA virus. Right, so that's a fact. But then what you do, we also had a specific PCR test that looked for the ISA virus. And all the tests have been negative consistently, no virus. You have to have sick fish, because if this disease were present here, it would be killing large numbers of fish. To confirm the disease, you actually have to have sick fish that have signs in them that are consistent with the disease. To confirm the disease, you actually have to have sick fish that have signs in them that are consistent with the disease. To confirm the disease, you actually have to have sick fish that have signs in them that are consistent with the disease. Now, when we have no evidence of disease and PCR results that can't be confirmed, the best way to interpret those is that they are false positive test results. We went and we tested 625 fish. We found it in just about every fish that had disease. We found it in healthy fish that were just being ready for transfer. So I decided that I couldn't provide any interpretation for what this meant. And so I decided it probably was not a major concern for our fish. It was not designed as a public document, so that's one of the unfortunate drawbacks of release of these records to the public.
To protect the interests of the salmon farming industry, the government allows the farms to keep their disease information confidential from the public and from scientists.